My book, The Sound of a Wild Snail Eating, recounts my year-long observations of a forest snail, a Neohelix albolabris. But this slide talk is the story behind the book, and before I even knew that a Neohelix albolabris existed, I had a very physically active life. When I wasn't working, I was hiking, sailing, and gardening. I wanted to write, but there was too much to do to sit still. Then, at the age of 34, I encountered a mysterious, nearly deadly pathogen. It changed my life forever. I was bedridden for a year, made a partial recovery, had multiple relapses, and was completely bedridden again. Then, a forest snail took up residence on my nightstand. A trivia question about my book popped up on the internet. How did the snail get into the bedroom? I began to watch the snail. It had adventures and interesting habits. It was nocturnal, and in the black of night, if I listened carefully, I could hear the sound of the snail eating. At first, the snail lived in a flower pot. It awoke each evening, and with astonishing poise it surveyed the strange country that lay around it. Slowly waving its tentacles, it pondered its circumstance with a regal air, as if from the turret of a castle. The snail's bedside companionship kept me from giving up all hope. Soon the snail was moved into a terrarium of woodland plants. While the human world rushed around, the snail was calm and quiet. While the human world came and went, the snail was always there. The snail had retractable eyes on the tips of its tentacles. The snail's tentacles, wrote Ernest Ingersoll in 1881, are as expressive as a mule's ears. The snail could pull 10 times its weight, and it had teeth, 2,640 teeth. I decided to write a book-length natural history thank you note to the snail. When I was a little better, I read scientific volumes on the gastropod, the Latin word for snail. I had to do my research lying down, holding a book over my head. When I finally started to write, there were millions of decisions, from word and sentence choices to structure and plot. I used my door jamb to organize my table of contents and choose quotes. What came first, the chapter on a snail's 3 senses, or the snail's remarkable courtship and love life? Could I write a whole chapter on slime? Did snails think? Could I go back in time to when a snail and a human were single cells? There was always a flashlight, notepad, and pen at my bedside, and in the morning my insomniac notes from the night before hold the answers to the upcoming evening's work. The backdrop for my natural history memoir was the challenge of illness. My desk was stacked with piles. I dreamed of a writing space not in my living room. Here is my kitchen recording studio, where I read drafts aloud. Tim Pearce, a malacologist at the Carnegie Museum of Natural History, and Ken Hotopp, a Maine biologist, were my consultants. Finally, the first draft of my book was ready to go to the publisher. I tied it up with ribbon. It was an exciting day. I was only 2 years into the 4-year writing process. Luckily, I didn't know that at the time. Here is a fraction of my book drafts. What used to be annoying piles are now called archives. The boxes in the back are my source and permission materials for quotes from Elizabeth Bishop, Gerald Durrell, Charles Darwin, Rainier Marie Rilke, E.O. Wilson, and dozens of others. The book illustrations needed to accurately show the snail's interesting behaviors. I covered a table with woodland plants. You can see my friend's hands and camera as she filmed a snail of the right species. See how this forest snail glides over the tips of moss? "Upon this slime, as upon a kind of carpet, the snail proceeds," wrote Oliver Goldsmith in 1774. We put the snail on a piece of saran wrap to get some full-body shots. The snail loved the saran wrap, as it could speed glide. In the top right photo, see how the snail's body contours to the leaf? Finally, my book was launched. It has been interesting to watch it glide into the world. Translations are coming out in many languages, and some countries choose their own illustrator. A friend took photos of the wild snail in several bookstores. On the right, it is snuggled into natural history with yaks and deer, and on the left, it's at home in memoir, mixing with the lives of composers and film stars, J.S. Bach, Lauren Bacall, and Warren Beatty. The sound of a wild snail eating is finding a home in the natural history and literature fields, and also in the medical humanities field, where literature about the illness experience helps medical students learn compassion skills. I am still following the snail as it travels, via my book, around the world. Here is a film clip of a forest snail gliding over moss. Thank you.